The stars had always called to humanity. For 300 years, they had answered that call, pushing their ships deeper into the cold darkness of space. But even after all that time, humans were still considered the youngest species in the galaxy. The older races looked at them the way adults look at children who have wandered into a room where they do not belong. Commander Jack stood on the bridge of the USS Sentinel, watching the endless black stretch out before him. His ship was small by galactic standards, a simple exploration vessel with a crew of 47. They had been traveling through the Andromeda expanse for 6 months, mapping dead systems and empty worlds that nobody else wanted. "Commander, I am picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Amy Cross from her station. She was young, barely 25, but she had sharp eyes and a sharper mind. "There is an energy signature coming from the third planet in this system." Jack walked over to her console and looked at the readings. The planet was a dead rock orbiting a dying red star. There should have been nothing there, but the sensors showed a faint pulse of power, regular and steady, like a heartbeat. "Wake up, Doctor," Jack said. "She will want to see this." Doctor was the ship's chief scientist. She studied ancient alien ruins and lost civilizations. When she arrived on the bridge 10 minutes later, her hair was messy and her eyes were tired. But the moment she saw the readings, all of that changed. "This is impossible," she whispered. "These energy patterns are older than anything we have ever found. Older than the, this is older than every known species in the galaxy combined." Jack felt a chill run down his spine. "How old are we talking?" Looked at him with wide eyes. 2 billion years, maybe more. The Sentinel descended toward the planet. As they got closer, the truth became clear. The planet was not a planet at all. It was a ship, a hollow sphere the size of a small moon, its surface covered in metal and machinery that had been sleeping for longer than life had existed on most worlds. They found a way inside through a massive opening that looked like it had been designed for ships much larger than theirs. The interior was dark and cold, but as soon as human feet touched the metal floor, lights began to flicker on. Systems that had been dead for 2 billion years suddenly hummed with life. "It is responding to us," said, her voice shaking with excitement and fear. "The ship is waking up because we are here." They explored for hours, finding chambers larger than cities and machines whose purpose they could not understand. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a control room. A single console stood in the center, covered in symbols that no human had ever seen before. Reached out and touched it. The room exploded with light. Images filled the air around them, showing a species that had existed before the stars were young. They were tall and elegant, with pale skin and eyes that held the wisdom of ages. They called themselves the Builders, and they had been the first intelligent life in the universe. The images showed their history. They had spread across the cosmos, creating wonders that lesser species could not imagine. They had built fleets of ships the size of planets, weapons that could crack stars like eggs, and engines that could move entire worlds. They had been gods walking among the stars. But something had hunted them, a darkness from beyond the edge of the universe, a thing called the Void Collective. It had come for the Builders with hunger that could not be satisfied. War had raged for millions of years, and in the end the Builders had lost. In their final days, they had hidden their greatest ships across the galaxy. They had scattered their technology like seeds, hoping that someday someone would find it. And they had done something else. They had traveled to young worlds where life was just beginning, and they had touched that life with their own essence. Earth had been one of those worlds. The images showed it clearly. The Builders had visited Earth when humans were nothing more than simple creatures crawling in the mud. They had changed humanity, shaping them, guiding their evolution. Humans were not just a random species that had developed intelligence by chance. They were the children of the Builders, created to one day inherit everything their parents had left behind. Jack stood frozen as the truth washed over him. Humanity was not the youngest species in the galaxy. They were the descendants of the oldest. The ships, said, her voice barely a whisper. They are keyed to human DNA. That is why they are waking up. They have been waiting for us. As if to confirm her words, the console lit up with new information. Across the galaxy, 16 other ships just like this one were coming online. 17 planet-sized warships, armed with weapons that could destroy stars and protected by shields that could withstand anything, all of them responding to the presence of their rightful owners. Jack opened a communication channel back to Earth. His hands were shaking. "Command, this is Commander on the Sentinel. We have found something, something that changes everything." It took several hours for his message to reach Earth, and several more for the response to come back. But when it did, Jack could hear the shock in the voice of Admiral Ben Carter. "Commander, we are receiving similar reports from across human space. Ships are appearing near our colonies, ships the size of moons, and they are not attacking. They are waiting. What the hell did you find out there?" Jack looked then at the console that still glowed with the light of an ancient civilization. He thought about all the years humanity had spent being treated like children by the older races. He thought about the swarm that had killed millions of humans while the Galactic Council did nothing. He thought about every insult, every embargo, every door that had been slammed in humanity's face. "We found our inheritance," Jack said. "Tell the Council that humanity is ready to take its place at the table, and this time no one is going to tell us where to sit." Outside the ancient ship, the stars burned on, silent witnesses to the moment everything changed. The children of the builders had finally come home, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The Hegemony Council met on the crystalline world as it had for 10,000 years. The great chamber was carved from living crystal that sang softly when the wind passed through it. Representatives from 12 elder species sat in their appointed places, arranged in a circle that had no head and no foot. They called themselves equals, though everyone knew that some were more equal than others. Ambassador Laura Griffin walked into the chamber alone. She was 53 years old, with gray streaking her brown hair and lines on her face that told stories of difficult negotiations and harder choices. Behind her, floating in the air, was a small drone that projected holographic images. She wore a simple black suit, nothing fancy, nothing designed to impress. She did not need to impress anyone today. The chamber fell silent as she entered. Every eye, every sensor, every form of alien perception turned to focus on her. Laura had been coming to this council for 15 years. She had begged for colony rights. She had pleaded for trade agreements. She had demanded justice when the swarm attacked human worlds. Every time she had been dismissed, ignored, or told to wait her turn. Today was different. High Chancellor of the spoke first. He was a serpentine creature, 3 meters long, with scales that shifted between green and gold. His species had been among the first to achieve space travel, and they had never let anyone forget it. "Ambassador Griffin," said, his voice cold and sharp, "the Council has observed alarming developments in human space. Massive vessels of unknown origin have appeared near your colonies, vessels that match descriptions from ancient records, vessels that should not exist." Laura nodded calmly. "Yes, High Chancellor, we have discovered them." "Discovered them?" The voice came from Ambassador of the Shoal Confederacy, a being that looked like a walking jellyfish contained within a water-filled suit. "You speak as if you simply found them lying about. These are builder ships, weapons of unimaginable power. The Council demands to know how you activated them." "They activated themselves," Laura said. "When humans touched them, it seems the builders designed them to respond to human DNA specifically." The chamber erupted in noise. Alien voices shouted over each other in a dozen different languages. The translation system struggled to keep up. Laura stood quietly and waited for the storm to pass. Raised a clawed hand and silence returned. This is precisely why these vessels cannot remain in human hands. Your species is too young, too reckless, too emotional. You have had space travel for only 3 centuries. We have had it for 30,000 years. The Council will assume custody of these ships for the safety of the entire galaxy." Laura smiled. It was not a friendly smile. "With respect, High Chancellor, I must decline." The words hung in the air like the first crack of thunder before a storm. No one had ever declined the Council before. Not like this. Not to their faces. "You decline." Scales turned dark red, a sign of anger among his kind. "You do not have the authority to decline. These weapons pose a threat to galactic stability. The Council has decided." Laura activated her drone. Holographic images filled the chamber, showing 17 planet-sized warships. Each one was positioned near a human colony, their ancient systems fully online, their weapons armed and ready. "Admiral Carter moved the fleet into defensive positions 12 hours ago," Laura said. "Any attempt to approach human space without permission will be considered an act of war." The chamber fell completely silent. Laura could feel the fear in the room. She could see it in the way Scales flickered, in the way Sform trembled inside his water suit, in the way every alien present seemed to shrink back from the images floating before them. "You threaten the Council?" asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," Laura said. "I am informing the Council of reality. You have spent centuries reminding humanity of its place. U.S. colony rights in the outer systems even when our population was bursting at the seams. You embargoed our trade goods because we undercut your prices. You watched the swarm devour 3 of our outer worlds and called it natural selection. You said we needed to learn that the galaxy is not a kind place." She paused and looked around the chamber, meeting every alien gaze without flinching. "We learned. We learned that no one was going to help us. We learned that we could only depend on ourselves. And now we have discovered that our ancestors were not simple creatures climbing out of the mud. Our ancestors built the stars themselves. These ships are ours by right of inheritance, and we will not give them up." A new voice spoke from the shadows of the chamber. It belonged to Ambassador of the Pale Wanderers, a species so ancient and mysterious that even the other elder races knew little about them. They rarely spoke at council meetings, preferring to observe in silence. "The human speaks truth," said. His voice was soft and musical like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We have long suspected that the builders did not simply vanish. We have studied their ruins, their artifacts, their genetic signatures. The patterns match. Humanity carries the blood of the builders in their veins. These ships belong to them." Turned on the pale wanderer with fury in his eyes. You knew and said nothing." "We suspected. Now we know." Turned his pale gaze toward Laura. "The question is not whether humans have the right to these ships. The question is what they will do with them." Laura felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her. The entire galaxy was watching. Every word she said would be remembered for generations. "Humanity does not seek war," she said slowly. "We do not want revenge for the years of mistreatment. We do not want to rule over others as we have been ruled. We want only what we have always wanted, a fair chance to build our future among the stars." She looked directly at. "But make no mistake. If anyone threatens our people, our worlds, or our ships, we will defend ourselves. The builders gave us the power to stand on our own. We intend to use it." The council had no response. For the first time in 10,000 years, the great powers of the galaxy had nothing to say. They could only sit in their ancient seats and stare at the young species that had suddenly become the most powerful force in the universe. Laura turned and walked out of the chamber without waiting to be dismissed. Behind her, she could hear the council erupting into chaos, voices raised in fear and anger and confusion. She did not look back. Outside, the crystal towers gleamed in the light of 3 suns. Laura looked up at the sky and thought about how small humanity had seemed just days ago. Now everything was different. The galaxy had changed, and there was no going back. She touched the communication device on her wrist. "Admiral Carter, this is Griffin. The Council refused to accept our position. Prepare for possible retaliation." Carter's voice came back steady and calm. "Understood, Ambassador. The fleet is ready. Let them come if they dare." Laura smiled grimly. She hoped it would not come to war. But if it did, humanity was finally ready to fight back. Captain Daniel Perry had served in the human fleet for 25 years. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belts of Sol. He had survived 3 border skirmishes with the... He had seen things that would give most people nightmares for the rest of their lives, but nothing had prepared him for commanding a ship the size of a small moon. The vessel had been named Cradle 1 by the scientists who studied it. It now orbited Earth, its massive form visible from the ground as a second moon hanging in the sky. Every day, thousands of people looked up and saw it there, a reminder that everything had changed. Daniel walked through corridors that were wide enough to fly a shuttle through. The walls glowed with soft blue light that seemed to respond to his presence, growing brighter as he approached and dimming as he passed. The ship knew he was there. It was watching him, learning him, accepting him as one of its own. Doctor met him in what they had started calling the memory chamber. She was a small woman with short red hair and glasses that she constantly pushed up her nose. She led the team trying to understand the builder technology, and she had barely slept in 2 weeks. "You need to see this," she said. Her voice was tired but excited. "We finally managed to access the historical archives. The ship has been recording everything since it was built. 2 billion years of memories stored in systems we are only beginning to understand." She led him to a platform in the center of the chamber. When they stepped onto it, the room transformed around them. Suddenly they were floating in space, surrounded by stars and galaxies that had long since burned out and died. "This is what the universe looked like when the builders were at their peak," said. "They had spread across the entire galaxy. They had built things we cannot even imagine. They were, for lack of a better word, gods." The images shifted. Daniel saw the builders themselves for the first time, tall and graceful beings with skin like polished marble and eyes that glowed with inner light. They moved through their cities with the confidence of a species that feared nothing. They had conquered the stars. Then the darkness came. It appeared at the edge of the galaxy, a shadow that swallowed light itself. Ships emerged from the darkness, but they were not ships in any normal sense. They were living things, creatures of pure hunger that consumed stars for fuel and fed on the energy of living worlds. "The Void Collective," said quietly. "That is what the builders called them. They came from beyond our universe, from the spaces between realities. No one knows where they originated or what they truly are, but they were hungry and the builders were food." Daniel watched in horror as the war unfolded before him. The builders fought back with all their power, but for every collective creature they destroyed, 100 more appeared. Worlds burned. Stars went dark. The beautiful cities turned to ash. "The war lasted for 60 million years," said. "The builders threw everything they had at the collective. In the end, they managed to push them back, to force them into retreat. But the cost was everything. Their population was reduced to a handful. Their empire was destroyed. They knew they would not survive." The images showed the final days of the builders. The survivors gathered their remaining ships and scattered them across the galaxy, hiding them in places where no one would look. They recorded everything they knew, every piece of technology, every weapon, every secret, hoping that someday someone would find it. And then they did something extraordinary. They could not rebuild their own species, said. There were too few of them left and the collective was still out there, waiting. So they created a new plan. They would seed young worlds with their genetic material. They would guide evolution on those worlds, shaping life to one day become like them. And when those species finally reached the stars, they would find the inheritance waiting for them. Daniel felt cold despite the warmth of the chamber. Earth was one of those worlds. Earth was the only world where it worked, said. The builders visited hundreds of planets, but something about Earth was special. Maybe it was the conditions. Maybe it was luck. But humans are the only species that carries true builder DNA. We are, in every sense that matters, their children. What happened to the collective? Daniel asked, though part of him did not want to know the answer. His face grew pale. That is the problem. The builders pushed them back, but they did not destroy them. They could not. The collective retreated to the void between galaxies, dormant but not dead. They have been waiting for 2 billion years, sleeping in the darkness. She touched a control on her wrist, and the images changed again. Daniel saw 17 points of light scattered across the galaxy, each one representing a builder ship. When we activated the ships, we sent out a signal. The same signal the builders used to communicate with each other across vast distances. It went out in all directions, faster than light, carrying the message that the children of the builders had finally awakened. Daniel understood. The collective heard it. The collective heard it, confirmed. Our sensors are picking up movement at the edge of the universe. Something is waking up. Something is coming. We do not know how long we have, maybe years, maybe months, but they are coming. Daniel stood in silence for a long moment, processing everything he had learned. Humanity had thought finding the builder ships was a gift, a miracle that would solve all their problems. Instead, they had inherited a war that had been paused for 2 billion years. "Does the command know?" he asked. "General is being briefed right now," said. "We need to prepare. We need allies." "Allies?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "The galaxy hates us. The Council wants to take our ships. They would dance on our graves. Who exactly is going to ally with us?" Looked at him with tired but determined eyes. "Everyone. When the collective arrives, they will not care about politics or old grudges. They will consume everything, human and alien alike. The only chance any of us has is to stand together." Daniel thought about the millions of humans they had killed. He thought about the Council that had ignored humanity for centuries. He thought about all the old wounds that had never healed. "Can we even do that?" he asked. "Can we set aside everything that has happened and fight beside our enemies?" "We have to," said simply, "because if we do not, there will be nothing left to fight about." Daniel looked up at the images still floating around them, the ancient war playing out in silence. The builders had fought alone and lost. Humanity would not make the same mistake. "Get me a line to General," he said. "We have work to do." Was a nightmare made real. The sky was the color of dried blood, choked with clouds of ash and smoke. The ground was covered in towering hive structures that rose like mountains of black chitin and bone. Billions of lived in those hives, creatures with sharp claws and mandibles that could cut through steel. They had been humanity's greatest enemies for 100 years. Commander Hart walked across the landing platform with her head held high, even though every instinct in her body screamed at her to run. She had lost her brother in the wars. She had watched the footage of what the swarm had done to the colony on New Haven. Part of her wanted nothing more than to see this world burn. But she had a job to do. The Queen Mother waited at the entrance to the central hive. She was enormous, 3 times the size of any worker drone, her body armored in plates of natural chitin that shimmered with dark colors. 100 warriors surrounded her, their claws clicking against the ground in a rhythm that sounded almost like speech. "Human," the Queen Mother said through a translation device attached to her thorax, "you come to our world with words of peace. This is unexpected. Your species usually comes with weapons and fire." Forced herself to stay calm. "Times have changed, Queen Mother. We face a threat that is greater than our old conflicts. I come to offer an alliance." The Queen Mother made a sound that might have been laughter. "Alliance? The hegemony has told us what you have found, the builder ships, the ancient weapons. With such power, why would you seek alliance with species you hate?" "Because power alone is not enough," said. What we face cannot be defeated by one species, no matter how strong. The Void Collective is coming, and when they arrive, they will not care about the color of our blood or the shape of our bodies. They will consume everything. The clicking of claws stopped. The Queen Mother leaned closer, her compound eyes reflecting space 1,000 times. The Void Collective, she said slowly. We know this name. Our oldest memories speak of the darkness between stars, the hunger that sleeps in the void. Our ancestors passed down warnings from before there were even a species. We thought they were myths. They are not myths, said. We have seen the records. We know what is coming. The builders fought the collective alone, and even with all their power they fell. We cannot make the same mistake. The Queen Mother was silent for a long moment. Around her, the warrior drones shifted nervously, sensing their leader's uncertainty. You ask us to fight beside the species that burned our hives, the Queen Mother said. You ask us to trust those who showed us no mercy. Stepped forward. It took all her courage not to flinch as the warriors tensed around her. I ask you to survive, she said. I lost my brother to your swarm. I have every reason to hate you. But I am standing here offering my hand because I know what is coming. The collective will not stop at human worlds. They will come for you too. They will come for everyone. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. A holographic image appeared, showing sensor data from the edge of the universe. Dark shapes were moving in the void, countless numbers of them, slowly waking from their ancient sleep. This was recorded 3 days ago, said. They are already stirring. By our calculations, they will reach the galaxy within 1 year, maybe less. When they arrive, the old wars will not matter. Nothing will matter except whether we can stand together. The Queen Mother studied the images for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that sounded almost like fear. The old ones were right to warn us, she said quietly. The darkness is coming, and we are all prey. She turned too, and for the first time there was something like respect in her compound eyes. They will fight beside humanity, not because we trust you, not because we have forgiven the past, but because we understand survival. We are hive creatures. We know that sometimes the only way to survive is to become part of something larger than ourselves. Felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had done it. The impossible had happened. Over the following weeks, more species joined the alliance. They were the hardest to convince. High Chancellor had to swallow his pride and accept that humanity now held the power. But when he saw the collective's ships moving through the void, even he had to admit that old politics meant nothing in the face of extinction. The Shoal Confederacy brought their massive warships, vessels that could carry entire oceans through space. They contributed their crystal technology, weapons that could focus energy into beams of pure light. The Pale Wanderers emerged from their hidden nebulae, bringing knowledge of the universe that no other species possessed. Admiral Ben Carter stood on the bridge of Cradle One and looked out at the largest fleet ever assembled in the history of the galaxy. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all of them flying in formation around the 17 builder vessels that formed the heart of the Armada. Never thought I would see this, he said quietly. Flying beside humans, taking orders from our command, the galaxy united. General Chris stood beside him, his face grim. It took the threat of extinction to make it happen. I just hope it is enough. It has to be enough, Carter said, because if it is not, there will be no second chance. He activated the fleet-wide communication system. His voice went out to every ship, every species, every soldier who had gathered to face the darkness. This is Admiral Carter. In the coming days, we will face an enemy that destroyed the greatest civilization the universe has ever known. They are older than our stars. They are more numerous than we can count, and they are coming to consume everything we have ever loved. He paused, looking out at the stars that had always seemed so endless and now felt terribly small. But we have something the builders did not have. We have each other. For the first time in history, the galaxy stands united. Not as or human, not as or, but as one people fighting for one future. Our ancestors built these ships to protect life itself. Today, we honor that purpose. Today, we fight not for our own species, but for all species. Today, we become the shield against the darkness. The fleet moved forward, 17 moons leading the way, heading toward the edge of the universe where the shadows were waking. Behind them, 100 worlds held their breath and prayed. The final battle was about to begin. The Void Collective emerged from the darkness like a tide of nightmares made real. There was no warning, no declaration of war, no communication of any kind. One moment the edge of the galaxy was empty, and the next moment it was filled with shapes that hurt the eyes to look at. Lieutenant Dawson flew his fighter through the chaos, dodging between beams of dark energy that dissolved anything they touched. His squadron had started with 12 pilots. Now there were 4 left, and the battle had only been raging for 3 hours. "Stay tight," he shouted into his communicator. "Do not let them separate us." The collective ships were not like normal vessels. They were alive, creatures of shadow and hunger that seemed to shift and change as they moved. Some were small, the size of fighters, darting through space like predatory fish. Others were massive, bigger than moons, their bodies trailing tendrils of darkness that reached out to grab anything that came too close. They had already consumed 2 star systems, had watched on the long-range sensors as the collective devoured entire suns, drinking in their energy and leaving nothing but cold, dead space behind. The stars themselves were going out. Aboard Cradle 1, Doctor worked frantically in the central command chamber. The builder ship was fighting at full power, its weapons tearing through collective vessels by the dozen, but it was not enough. Nothing seemed to be enough. "We are losing," Admiral Carter said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. He had not slept in 2 days. None of them had. "For every collective ship we destroy, 10 more take its place. We cannot win a war of attrition." Looked up from her console. There might be another way. The builders left something in the deep memory banks, a weapon they never used because the cost was too high. They called it the Genesis Pulse. What does it do? It targets the specific molecular structure of the collective. If we can calibrate it correctly, it will unravel their physical forms across an entire sector of space, maybe more. Hands trembled as she spoke. The builders were afraid of it because it requires an enormous amount of power, the kind of power that could burn out all 17 ships permanently. Carter stared at her. "You are saying we could end this war right now, but it would mean losing the fleet." "Not just losing it," said, "destroying it. The builder technology would be gone forever. We would go back to being what we were before, a young species with nothing but our own ships and our own strength." The bridge fell silent. Outside, the battle raged on. Dawson lost another wingman to a collective tendril that wrapped around the fighter and crushed it like paper. A cruiser vanished in a flash of dark energy. The hive ships were swarming the larger collective creatures, sacrificing themselves to buy time that was rapidly running out. "Do it," Carter said finally. Hesitated. "Admiral, are you sure? This is everything. The inheritance, the power, all of it." "I am sure." Carter looked out at the stars that were dying one by one. "The builders gave us these ships to protect life. If we let life die just to keep the ships, we have betrayed everything they stood for. Power means nothing if everyone is dead." Nodded and began working at her console. Across all 17 builder ships, ancient systems that had never been activated began to hum with power. Energy flowed through channels that had been dormant for 2 billion years, gathering at the heart of each vessel. Captain Daniel Perry felt the Cradle 1 shudder beneath his feet. The lights dimmed as power was drawn away from everything else, focused into a single terrible purpose. "All ships," Carter broadcast to the fleet, "pull back to minimum safe distance. Something big is about to happen." The Allied fleet scattered, retreating as fast as their engines could carry them. The collective pursued, sensing weakness, hungry for the kill. They swarmed toward the 17 builder ships, tendrils reaching out to consume them. And then the Genesis pulse fired. Light exploded outward from each builder vessel, not normal light but something that carried the essence of creation itself. It spread across space faster than thought, washing over the collective like a wave over sand. Where the light touched the collective, they simply ceased to exist. Their shadow forms dissolved, their hunger ended, their ancient malice finally silenced. The wave spread outward and outward, reaching the very edge of the galaxy, cleansing everything it touched. Dawson watched through his cockpit window as the darkness vanished. One moment the sky was full of nightmares, and the next moment there was nothing but stars, clean and bright and beautiful. "They are gone," he whispered. "My God, they are actually gone." Aboard Cradle 1, the lights flickered and died. The ancient engines fell silent. Doctor watched her console go dark, taking with it 2 billion years of accumulated knowledge. "The ships are dead," she said quietly. "All of them. The pulse burned out every system. There is nothing left." Admiral Carter slumped in his chair, exhausted beyond words. "We won." "We won," confirmed. "The collective is destroyed, every single one of them across the entire galaxy. It is over." The silence that followed was unlike any silence in the history of the universe. For 2 billion years, the collective had lurked in the darkness, a threat that hung over all life. Now they were gone, and the galaxy could finally breathe. 1 week later, the surviving leaders gathered on. The crystal chambers were crowded with representatives from every species, all of them looking tired and wounded but alive. High Chancellor approached Ambassador Laura Griffin. His scales were dull, and he moved slowly, bearing the weight of what had happened. "We were wrong about humanity," he said. "You were never the children we dismissed. You were the ones we were waiting for." Laura looked at him with eyes that held no anger, no desire for revenge, only exhaustion and a quiet hope. "We never wanted power," she said. "We only wanted to survive, to find our place among the stars." "You have done more than find your place," said. "You have earned it." Outside, the stars burned on, silent witnesses to the sacrifice that had saved them all. The builder ships floated dead in their orbits, monuments to an inheritance that humanity had given away to protect a galaxy that had once despised them. But in the hearts of every species, something had changed. They looked at humans differently now, not as children, not as newcomers, but as equals, as heroes, as family. Dawson flew his battered fighter back to Earth, passing the dark hull of Cradle 1 as he went. The ship that had saved everything was cold and empty, but somehow it still felt like it was watching him, proud of what its children had become. The galaxy had stood in silence when humanity inherited its power. Now it stood in silence again, but this time the silence was different. It was the silence of gratitude, the silence of peace, the silence that comes after a long and terrible war, when the survivors finally have time to rest and heal. And somewhere in that silence, humanity smiled. They had found their place at last, not through conquest, not through power, but through sacrifice, through choosing to save others instead of themselves. That, in the end, was what made them worthy of the stars.